And now it's time for some news. And of course, as expected, the FCC last week, ignoring a lot of public sentiment, voted to overturn the regulations that required ISPs to treat data that they have transiting across their networks equally. This is the first time in many, many years where there are no rules anymore about how ISPs treat different types of content. Before we had, of course, these regulations, but before that, there were rules that the FCC had attempted to put in place that were overturned by the courts. And that was what led the Obama administration to do what they did, which was creating these regulations in the first place because Congress hadn't done anything. And now we're at a point where I think everyone's fears are going to be soon realized. I don't think the ISPs are going to end the world as we know it all at once, but we're going to start seeing things creep in. And I've got a couple of things to show you that I think are already happening. Now, the first thing I want to do, though, is point you at the Comcast net neutrality commitment. They have this on their website right now. You can see it at this link down below right here. We talked about this about 2 weeks ago when I was speculating as to what they might do, including the fact that even though Comcast is saying they're not going to block, slow down, or discriminate against lawful content, their data caps will likely make you, the consumer, likely to block different sites that might eat against your data cap in favor of visiting content providers that don't. And of course, Comcast owns a lot of the content that they're going to transit across their own network. Really, this is from an antitrust standpoint really concerning to me, but there's nothing we can do about it anymore. They say, believe in full transparency of their customer policies. The next slide is going to put that into question. And then the last point here is therefore sustainable and legally enforceable net neutrality protections for their customers. In other words, they too hope that Congress takes up this issue and tries to create some new rules about this, because then they can have some part in it. They have a lot more control over Congress than they had in the past over the FCC, although they certainly have some friends at the FCC right now. But I want to show you what Comcast's net neutrality statement looked like 2 or 3 years ago. This is from archive.org. You can go down here and see this for yourself. And you can see that this statement was a lot longer than it is now. So here is what it looks like now. This is what it used to look like. And the reason why it's longer here is they took stuff off of it. And you can see the 3 things that matter most of this discussion that they removed. They took away the statement that they don't prioritize internet traffic or create paid fast lanes. They are now apparently going to do that because they took it off their pledge from 2 or 3 years ago. They also committed to helping low-income families get access to the net. That's off their pledge as well. And the last point that they removed is what they were going to inspire innovation, promote learning, and create access to jobs. They took that off of their statement as well. And that makes me very concerned as someone whose job is making content on the internet that might not be on a platform that's favorable to Comcast. And this is, again, very much a concern of mine. And I think the first thing we're going to see are the paid fast lanes. And I wanted to show you the diagnostic screen from my cable modem. And this is going to give us a real hint as to what's going on. Now, right now, I am on the Comcast Blast plan, which means I get 250 megabits per second downstream, and I can transmit 10 megabits per second upstream. That's the maximum that they offer in my area. And by the way, this is the only choice that I have for internet access here. Now, you'll see, though, that my downstream bonded channels here are 24. So there are 24 channels dedicated to data on my cable modem, basically on that coax cable coming into my house from Comcast. 24 of these channels are dedicated solely for internet traffic, yet I am not using all of these channels at the moment. 24 channels here, as you can see, 38 megabits per second each, totals 912 megabits per second. So for all intents and purposes, my cable modem here has essentially a gigabit connection back to my Comcast node. I'm not getting, again, those speeds, but the fact is that they have locked in these channels. These are not being used for television right now. This is all in. In fact, these channels have been increasing over the last couple of months. When I first got this new modem, I think maybe half of those were in use, and now I'm using the full amount. And my theory here is that we're very soon going to be seeing services that might be able to pay to deliver data faster to me than you might with a competing service. And I was making the example a couple of weeks ago of maybe Steam versus the Microsoft Store. Maybe Microsoft might be able to pay Comcast to deliver a game to me in gigabit performance versus Steam, which is going to be limited to 250 megabits per second. This is the kind of stuff we're going to start seeing very quickly here. And this is it. The fast lane has been installed. At least the road is there, and we'll see how the tolls work on it. But nonetheless, I've got gigabit in my house at this point, and I don't have the ability to get myself a gigabit plan. And they're able to do this because there's no competition. If somebody rolled in tomorrow and decided, hey, we're going to put in gigabit internet for you, I'm sure Comcast could snap their fingers and offer that to me as well. But the fact is they're artificially holding it back because they can, and they're going to sell that scarcity now to other people who wish to take advantage of it at the expense of their competitors, and that is what is going on. So that's going to lead me to our first Q&A here today, because I did get some pushback on my opinion about net neutrality, and I want to honor all opinions and give you some counterpoints to them. And the summation of what people are talking about here is that the free market is eventually going to work out. We'll see better choices. Some people use the mobile phone industry as an example, and here in the United States, I have 4 different options for my mobile phone carrier. I've got Verizon, T-Mobile, AT&T, and Sprint. And about a year or two ago, T-Mobile said unlimited data for everybody. And what do you know? Everybody else went to unlimited data after that as well, with some caveats, of course. But nonetheless, the consumer environment got better because there was competition. Where I am, there is no competition. So at the moment, when we go back and look at my locked-in channels here, I have gigabit service that is just not being provided to me because there's no competitor offering that service right now. And we've also seen that Comcast has been very aggressive in preventing municipalities from creating some options for their citizens to have broadband speed. And they've also been very difficult about pole attachments as well, including AT&T, who owns a lot of poles in some areas as well. So it's really hard for competitors to spring up. They make it very difficult for them. And the fact that I have no choices makes this difficult. Here's the point that I'm willing to concede. I do think regulation in a competitive industry can be counteractive to growing those industries. I do agree with that statement in many cases. But what I do think should happen here is that these rules and these regulations should be in place when there's a regional monopoly. If that monopoly can demonstrate that there is an effective competitor in their area, I'm okay with those regulations being loosened up. We did that here in Connecticut when there was more options for cable television being offered by the phone company. They relaxed the regulations that were on the cable television providers as a result because there was a competitive option. Of course, the phone company decided to stop growing and the regulation stayed in place, but nevertheless, I think it was an appropriate decision to make when there is a competitive market. But right now, there isn't one. I have no choice beyond what I'm using for Comcast right now, and many other consumers across this country are in the same boat, partly because it's so hard and so expensive to bring in broadband services. I'm holding out hope that some magical wireless technology might appear that might make that entry point less expensive, but the reality is for now, that is not the case. We have monopolies that will be generating this artificial scarcity, monopolies that will be taking advantage of their monopolistic position in the market. And in the case of Comcast and many other ISPs who also own content, they'll be able to use that monopoly to favor their own media over other media that doesn't have the advantage of owning the wires that deliver content to people's homes. The FCC in the past had been very clear about these kinds of relationships. They limited how many newspapers and radio stations different companies could own in a particular market. All of that is gone now, and I feel like the gatekeepers are trying to find a way to create artificial scarcity to once again control everything that we consume as consumers, and that is really a step in the wrong direction. So my hope is that the backlash will continue on this, that Congress will be taking a look at this and maybe developing some regulations that treats these companies differently when they're the only game in town in a regional market, and we'll see where it goes from there. But right now, not good for consumers and not good for independent creators like myself.
This channel is brought to you by the Lon.TV supporters, including gold-level supporters, the Black Eyed and Blues Music Hour podcast, Chris Allegretta, and Kalyan Kumar. If you want to help the channel, you can by contributing as little as $1 a month. Head over to lon.tv/support to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe. Visit lon.tv/s.